In this video, I'm going to show you how to migrate your data from Bubble to FlutterFlow. Well, not really, because FlutterFlow doesn't store data, but we do integrate with any backend you want. And in this video, I'll show you how to migrate that data to Firebase, including any relational data you have, and how to set up authentication and display and work with your data. Okay, so I'm here in Bubble, and I've got two database views right here. I've got a users database and a posts view right here. And these are relational, so the users have posts. And we're going to retain that relationship as we migrate our data. Okay, so the first thing is to export these as CSVs from Bubble. So just go over to each one of these tables and export, and you want it in CSV. That's great. It'll be sent to your email, and go to our other one as well. And we're going to export that. Great. Okay, next up, we want to prepare that data for importing it into FlutterFlow. So let's open these up in Google Sheets. All right, so we're in Google Sheets. Let's come over and import those CSVs. So I've got my users one right here. So let's just drag and drop that in. And I want to just replace this spreadsheet. Great, and now let's bring in those posts. And let's just insert a new sheet in here. Awesome. Okay, so first let's deal with our users. And first let's remove any spaces or special characters in here. And so I'm just going to camel case these. I don't need this modified date, so let's just delete this. And I don't need the slug, so we can delete both of those. Okay, great. All right, the next step is to generate a unique ID. And this will be used to create that relationality between our two views, or what Firebase calls collections. And we need to do this because when you export these CSVs out of Bubble, the relationship is made by this email address. Now, of course, this is not how Bubble actually has this relationship in their backend. They make that connection through a unique ID as well, but they just don't provide that when you export the data. So we have to make it ourselves, but it's no problem because it's real easy. So first, just put up here, we're gonna say UID for unique ID. And then we're just gonna dump in a formula here for generating a unique ID that I definitely didn't get from ChatGPT. And we provided this in the description. Now just double click down here to fill it out. And this will be newly generated every time there's a change made. So what you wanna do is you wanna copy all of these and paste in the values, and there's a shortcut to that, which is Shift-Command-V, so that now these are static values and they don't change. Okay, now let's come over to our posts, and we're gonna want a unique ID in here too. And what we're gonna do is we're going to look up our user's unique ID in this other sheet here. So that's just simple V lookup. And the search key is going to be this value, comma. The range that we're gonna be searching over is the email and the unique ID. Next, it's asking for the index. That is, what value do we want returned from this range? And it starts with 1 and only has 2 values here. So we want the second value. And finally, we say, is this sorted or not? And it is not. So we'll put false. Enter. Great. And just double click that to go down, accept that, and just take one in the middle to confirm that it's working. So I'll look at Matthew Davis right here. It ends in 7Z, and come back here, look for Matthew Davis, and that's 7Z. Beautiful. Okay, sweet, we're almost done. The last thing we have to do is convert this date-time value into a format that Firebase wants. And so come up here to this first one, and come up into this more formats, and come down to custom date time. And let's just delete all of this and we'll remake it. And the format should look like this. So if you come under here, we want year, and we want the full numeric year, dash month, and we want month with a leading 0, dash again, and day, once again, same format, day with leading 0. Next, we want space, hours, leading 0, colon, minutes, leading 0, colon, seconds, leading 0. Done. Beautiful. Now you can just highlight the rest of these and add that format, which should be added in here. Great. Next, I'm going to finish formatting these dates, but we already have that set up, so that should be easy. Boom. Lastly, we got to do one other thing to these UIDs to get them working properly as relational data. Now, there are multiple ways in Firestore to relate data, but we're going to use what's called a document reference. And a document reference will be a path to that related data. So here we've got our posts and they're related to a user. So James' text right here will be related to his user record right here. And that connection will be happening by a path. And the structure of that path in Firestore is /users/ whatever the document ID is. So for our case, it's this. So all we need to do is append a /user/ to turn it into a path that Firestore wants. So you can just come over into here and say equals concatenate, and we want to concatenate a /users/ combined with comma this, and press enter, and let's autofill that. Beautiful. So now you can keep that UID if you want, but you don't need it at this point, and we'll just call this user ref. Awesome. So now when we import this, Firestore will know how to link these two collections. And that's it for the data prep. So now let's go set up our project in FlutterFlow. All right, I'm here in FlutterFlow, and let's just create a new project. Mine is called My Faster, and a new blank project. And when you start a new project, FlutterFlow provides you with this setting up Firebase wizard, which is really helpful. So we do want to set up Firebase on this. So next step. And now we want to jump over to Firebase to set up a new project. So you can just jump over to firebase.com, sign up with your Gmail account, and we'll take it from there. All right, if this is your first time using Firebase, you don't have any other projects here. I've got some projects I've already made, but let's just add a new one in right here. Let's add the name of your project, My Face. That's fine. Here, it's asking you if you want to set up Google Analytics for your project. This is great because you don't have to do any custom setups and it'll just natively integrate. So if you want that, you can continue, and then you'll give us some options in Google Analytics for where you want this property put. I'm not going to set it up right now, and just create your project. This should take less than a minute. Great, it's all ready, so just continue. Awesome. Next, you want to come into here and go into users and permissions. And what we're going to do now is we're going to give FlutterFlow access to Firebase, to this database. So we're going to add a member, and it's going to be Firebase at flutterflow.io, and the role is going to be editor. Awesome. Add that member. Next, you want to come into advanced permission settings. This will bring us into Google Cloud Console, where we're just giving FlutterFlow additional permissions to manage our database and cloud functions. So you want to find that email we just set up, firebase at flutterflow.io, go into there, and we're going to add 2 roles. These are permissions that we're giving to FlutterFlow. First, we're going to search for Cloud Functions Admin and add that. And the last one is you want Service Account User. And you might have to scroll a little bit. There we go. Boom. Save that, and we're done here. So you can go back to Firebase. All right, so we've connected FlutterFlow to Firebase. Next, we want to actually set up the database. So we can come under this build and go to Firestore database and just create a database. While you're building your app, you want to start it in test mode. And when you're ready to launch your app, you want to come back here and set it to production mode. This will just mean your permissions for writing the database will be more open, but it'll also put a timestamp on access to this database. So after 30 days, the permissions will be revoked. This is just an easy way to get started building real quickly without going into detail about who can write what where. All right. Next, choose your default Firestore location, so where you think the closest location to the majority of your users, and enable. Beautiful, and that's set up. Next, let's come into here and go to project settings and just click into default Google Cloud Platform resource locations. It should already be set here, and you just click done. Awesome. The last thing to do in here is to set up our authentication. So you can go under build and authentication and get started. Now here you can choose any of the providers, any of the different ways you can allow your users to sign in. We're just going to start with email and password for now and turn that on and save. And that's it. We're done here in Firebase. But before you go into your project settings, and we want to grab this project ID right here. So copy that and let's get back into FlutterFlow. All right, so let's paste this in here and connect. Great, FlutterFlow recognizes that project, and now let's generate our config files. Awesome, Firebase is connected to FlutterFlow. Next, we want to tell FlutterFlow that we want authentication. Next, we want to enable authentication. So that's telling FlutterFlow that we want to integrate with our Firebase authentication, and we want to create a user collection. This is just a helper function that will automatically create a user collection, or what in Bubble is called a view, with a bunch of default fields like first name and last name. Next, we can set initial pages, so pages to sign up, and a home page when the user is logged in. So for this first sign in or sign up page, we're gonna go to this auth tab and choose this one right here. And that's fine. And in the login page, we'll just create a blank page so we can build some of that ourselves. Beautiful. And let's start building. Okay, when you sign in, often you'll have some errors and some warnings here. This is normal, it's nothing to worry about, especially if you're using template components or pages. Those will have actions or dynamically bound data that you just haven't set up yet. So we'll look at these later, but if you want to handle them, you can click on them and it'll bring you to the place that's generating the error. But we'll look at this later. Right now, let's import our data. So you can come over here to this icon right here, which is where you access your Firestore data. And you can see immediately we've got our users collection. That's the one that FlutterFlow set up for us automatically. Now, a couple things to know about using this. First is that these are all default fields, so don't mess with them. You can, of course, use additional fields. And if you're importing with a CSV, those will be automatically created, so you don't have to add them here. The one field I would set up is if you're using document reference. And that is, if you come in here, you have a document reference. And this will be when you're referencing another collection. So let's come in and create another collection, our posts collection. And when you create a collection, you've got the option to start with some templates that have common schema structures already set up, but we're just gonna start from scratch. And the only thing we're gonna set up here is our user ref. That'll be, so every post has a user because a user makes a post. And the data type will be a document reference. And you just twirl this open and set the collection that it will be referencing, and that'll be users. And select that, confirm that, and we're all ready to go. So now to upload your CSV, just click on Manage Content, and this will bring you into our Firestore Data Manager. And come over here and upload a CSV, and just grab that CSV from your Google Sheet and upload it here. All right, in this window, you wanna do two things. First, you wanna review the fields here, and you wanna be looking for which ones are going to be new, that's new columns, new fields, that didn't exist yet that FlutterFlow will create. And so these are going to be all new here, and these ones over here will be the new ones. And that all looks good. And the second thing is you want to review the data types. Now, most of the time FlutterFlow will recognize the correct data type, but there's a lot of values that can be different data types. So make sure you specify which one it is. And this is really important because FlutterFlow is type safe. So actions and bindings will only be available to their proper type. So make sure to set that up correctly here. So these all look good, string, string, string. You can see here that our date time came in correctly, and email, and the last one here, the UID, we want to set that to this UID. What this is going to do, this will set this to the main document ID. And if you remember, this is how we will link together our two tables, our two collections. So that all looks good, so we can validate and import. The next step is our field imports. So this is just going to tell us which new fields are being added and to what collection. That all looks good. And return to the content manager. All right, great. And here are our users. Now, once you have your data uploaded, you can edit it or delete it, or when you click on any of these values, it'll be added to your clipboard. All right, great. Now let's import our posts collection. So do the same thing with that, reviewing the new fields and the data types. That all looks good. And we can see that it recognized that this is a document reference. Beautiful. Same thing as before. That all looks good. And just make sure you click over to the right collection, and that all came in beautifully. All right, that's awesome. So we've imported our data. And finally, let's learn how to display our data, which is also a good way to confirm that our data has come in correctly, and especially the relational data, and set up our authentication so the users that we imported can actually sign in. Okay, awesome. Let's jump back into FlutterFlow's editor. But before we do that, let's just jump into our settings right here. And we've got these Firestore rules. And these are just the rules that define who has access to what data. So who can write and read what collections. So let's just deploy that. All right, great. All right, now let's jump into our editor. All right, so first let's display some data here. Now, when you create a blank page, you're gonna get this app bar, which is up here, and you can delete that if you want, but we'll keep it in. And you get a column, and that's fine for us now. So let's go over into this right side here and come up to this third tab right here, which is the same one as before. And this has to do with backend queries. And this could be from your Firebase or another API. And let's just show our users. That's fine for now. This is just telling us that we're gonna generate children, that is the things inside the column, by this backend query. So each document in that collection, or you can think about it as each row in Bubble, will be a child here. So yeah, that's what we want. Okay, great. So now it's bound, and you can see that bound symbol over there. But of course, there's nothing in here. So let's add something in here. So you can click on this icon here or up here, and we'll just add a text. Now, we added one text, but you can see a bunch of kind of ghosted ones here. And that just happens when you have bound text. And so it's indicating that, hey, when you test this, you'll see all that dynamic data. Okay, so we go into this text, and let's just give it a little styling here, maybe some padding, and let's increase the size a little bit. And now let's actually bind this. So if you scroll all the way up, we've got our text here, which of course you could hard code to any value here, or you can bind it to a dynamic value with this icon. And anywhere you see this icon, you see down here and down here, you can bind those values. So let's come in here. And when we come in here, we've got a lot of options. And the first thing up top here, you see, it's just telling us we're setting it from a variable, and it's telling us that it's looking for a string. And this is what I said about FlutterFlow being type safe. Okay, so all of these options are the sources we have available to us to generate this value if we don't want to hard code it in. And so what are we looking for? Well, we're looking for this user's document right here. And you can see when we hover over it, it's going to highlight it both in the widget tree and on the canvas to tell us where this data is actually coming from. And that's exactly what we want. So let's twirl this open and see what we have available to us. And what do we have? Well, we have our user's document. And so let's just bind to the first name right here. But you know what? I feel like we want to show the first and the last name. So let's come back in here, and instead of this, let's edit what we're binding to here. And let's close this up, and I want to combine some text here. And so I'm going to combine that first name, and let's just add in a space and add in the last name. Beautiful. Now, over on the canvas, you don't actually see it. And that's actually helpful for you as a designer, because it means that you won't be racking up a huge bill from your backend service, which here is Firebase, because this would mean every time you went to a new page just to check some padding, that you would be querying that backend and it would be costing you. So it's only when you test it is that you'll see the dynamic values. Okay, so we're almost done. But up here, we've got that error that we've got to deal with. And there are two things. There are warnings and there are errors. And warnings are things that you should review, but don't stop you from testing and running your app. Errors do, and you have to take care of those. So we can see here, it says auth action. Something's wrong with this auth action that's set up. And you can click on this and it's gonna bring you exactly to the place. And what's going on here is that this authentication isn't fully set up yet, but let's just delete this because we wanna test it out right now. And this is gonna be common if you use any templates, that you're just gonna be deleting stuff and adding it in later. Okay, so let's test this. Awesome, and there it is, all of our users. Okay, so this data is coming in great, but let's get a little deeper. So let's say we wanna click into one of these users and show their specific posts. How would we do that? Well, let me show you. So we're gonna need another page, so let's just create another blank one and call it posts. Okay, so what do we want on this page? Well, maybe we want to display their name up here. That would be cool. And then their posts down here in this column. So let's just add some text in here just like before. So we've got something to work with. Add a little padding in just like before. Let's give it a little left alignment and just jump that up a little bit. Okay, that sounds good. Okay, so we've got these two things right here. This is getting to be a little bit more complicated data wrangling. So how are we going to do this? Well, when the user clicks on a user, they're going to come to this page. So how does this page get the data it needs? Well, you pass data between pages with page parameters. And if you're not seeing this, just click on the canvas or click on this top level element right here and you'll see it. Now, whenever you're passing parameters, you always need two things. You need to pass it. You need to send the data from one page. So you need to set that up. And then you need to receive that data here. So let's set up this receiver here, and then we'll set up the sending. So what do we want here? Well, we want their name. So let's just add in a parameter here and we'll just call it name. And it's going to be a string. Okay, that's easy enough. But the next one is a little bit more complicated because here we'll probably have a bunch of different posts. So how do we get that? Well, you might think, oh, well, maybe we'll send the whole collection. But of course, we don't want to do that. But what we could send is a reference to the user that we clicked on. And then we could do a backend query. We could look up all the posts and just filter it by that user's ID. Because if you remember our data structure here, in our posts, we have a reference to the user, like the user that made that post. So as long as we have this user reference, well, we can filter this query by that reference. Okay, let me show you how to do that. So we want another page parameter and we want it to be the user ref, and this will be a document reference, and we specify the collection type, and it will be to users. That is, the document reference will be to an individual user. We're going to use that reference to filter the list down here. Okay, great. So let's come into our column right here. All right, so we've set up the structure, these parameters to receive this data. But now we need to bind those to the actual elements on the page so we can display them. So let's just come into this page title right here and come up to our binding right here. And you can see we've got these page parameters and we can just add our name in here. So whatever gets passed along the way in that name parameter will show up here. Next, that user ref. So let's come into our column here, and we can't just bind that because it's just a reference. That is, it's just like a path, like /user/ that unique ID. But we're just using that to filter this list. So let's come into our backend query just like before. And this time we want to look at our posts collection. And let's scroll down here to filters. And let's open that filter up. And we want to filter by the user reference. And we want that reference in the collection to be equal to the user reference that's coming into the page. Beautiful. Awesome. So that column has the correct filtered data coming in, but once again, we need to bind the individual elements in here to the correct data. Now, this can be a little bit confusing here. We don't want these page parameters because we're using those page parameters to look things up. And so that's what we want to be looking at. And so here is our query, and what we want is those texts. Beautiful. So this page is set up. We're so close. All we have to do now is set up the sending in that original page and the actual navigation, but that'll happen at the same time. So let's come back to our home page right here and come to each of our items and come over to the second thing right here, which is our action flow editor. And once again, this is where you define the logic, the business logic of your application. So you add an action here and you can see what type of action it is. Right now it's on tap, but you have these other options. And what do we want it to do? You can search for in here, but it's actually the first one that we're looking for. We want to navigate to our posts page. Now, skip over these options for now. You can look at those, but what we really want is these parameters right here. Now, you can see we've got two options: to define a parameter or to pass a parameter. Now, we already set up our parameters. That would be defining. And if we were to click that, it would shoot us over to this page, whatever we put in here, so we could define them. But we've already done that. And so that's why we're seeing pass. If we didn't define them, all we would see is this define. We wouldn't see this pass. But because we already set those up, we can just say pass. And the first one will pop in, and we can say pass, and we'll get out another one. And then it disappears because it knows those are the only ones we've set up. Okay, beautiful. So these are the two parameters that we need to set. That is to say, FlutterFlow recognizes that, hey, when you get to this page, I'm expecting to have these two things. It's like you have these two empty buckets and you say, hey, put something into these buckets right now. Okay, so let's do that. So we twirl this open and we're just saying our name parameter, and you could hard code it in, but most of the time you will not be doing that. And you can open this up. And of course we want a value out of this generated list. So it's this user's document. And let's just send along our first name. But if we want to send that whole name like we're using here, there's actually a cool way to do that. So if we just come back over to our binding over here and just click in here into these three dots, you can just copy this variable. And this happens wherever you're binding variables, and come in here and we can just paste that value in. And that's all going to work because of the type safety. We're getting a string out of this. So that's great. All right. Lastly, our user ref. So it's expecting a user reference. So we just click this open, same thing. Let's open that up. And because of type safety, we're only allowed to use these ones, and it's the user reference. Often when you're binding data, after you bind it, you're given other options, but this is what I want. And FlutterFlow recognizes that. And confirm. And that's it. We're ready to test this. So let's just jump back over to that test that's still open, and we can hot reload it so we don't have to wait. So you can come up here and click this instant reload. All right, so nothing has changed here, but when we click into anyone, beautiful, look at that. We see their posts. All right, last thing to do is let's set up that authentication, and this will be really fast. All right, so let's come over to this auth page. So we've got our input fields right here. So all we need to do is set up the logic. So let's go to get started, and in the second tab right here, we have got our actions, our logic. And if you scroll down right here, Firebase Authentication, you can just twirl that open, and we want to create account. Next, we have the option to set our auth provider, which we want email, and we have to set which email field it is. And we've got this email address, which is the one we want here. And you can see it's highlighted there. And if you twirl this open, you can see the name of it right there, and you can edit it up here. And so that's great. And then we've got our password field, and we need password. That's that one right there. And we need a confirmation password field. So let's just come over to this password and Command D duplicate, and we can use this as our confirmation password one. So let's just change this to password confirm and accept that. And when we go back in, we can say password confirm. Beautiful. Next up, we want to create a user document when they sign up. That's great. And we're just specifying which collection it is. It's the users one. And here you can set any other fields, say name, anything else we've set up. And so let's just add this right now. So we've at least got a name to display. So I'm going to just grab this email, Command D duplicate to this top one right here. And instead of email, it's going to be name. Keyboard type is just going to be text. And we can change this label text in here from email to name. And finally, we can just change the label on this to name. Great. So now, because we duplicated that, let's just make sure our email address field is set correctly. And we can set our fields. So we've got our email, and we want that set from a variable, and that'll be from a widget state. That is, so we're grabbing it straight from that text field, and that's the email address. And we've got our name that we want, first name, and that'll be from a variable as well. Once again, from a widget state and the name. And the last thing we need to do is change the entry page, change the first page when we test our app. So come over here, and in app details, we want to say the entry page is auth2. And we can just change the login page to that home page. Beautiful. Let's test it out. Beautiful. And just like that, we're in. And you can see right there. Now, one last thing for the users that you imported. You can't import their passwords, so they're gonna have to reset it. So let me show you the reset action. So after you migrate your users, if you integrate other social logins like Google that uses OAuth, they can just sign in with their Google account and it'll be fine. But if they're using their email, they'll have to reset their email. So you can send them to a page that has, let's say, a reset button. So let's just duplicate this. And on the second here, we can remove this action and just set up a reset password action. And all you need to do is to specify their email. They'll get an email to reset their password and they'll be good to go to log in. So that's migrating your data from Bubble to FlutterFlow. Let us know below if you've got any questions. We'd love to help. If there's any other migration questions you have about design or backend or logic, we'd love to help. Please leave a comment below and we'll see you in the next video.